That's official. All right, here we are. Week one. Hi, Sarah. You don't have to find your mic. Okay, unless you want to.
Hi, how
Hi.
are you?
Great. How are you?
I'm wonderful.
I gotta admit, Sarah was one of the reasons we decided to do this because Sarah and Carolyn and I had this book sitting on our desk, and the three of us were just going to meet to talk about it. And then we did the classic, well, why don't we just invite every single person who might want to come and talk about it, and we'll all talk about it together. We were going to keep with the three of us, we're going to keep ourselves honest so that we would continue to read it. And now we're all going to keep ourselves honest. So this is good.
Well, I'm thrilled to be invited, and I think you got the perfect group.
I think it's fantastic. I love the group. I think it's excellent. And so I'll start with I'll lead with the thought we had is that there's a lot of chapters in this book, but they're relatively small. So we thought we would go in an every 2 week scenario. So not every week for this in our AT town hall slot, but instead every 2 weeks. So I will put the link in the chat. I bet just by saying that, Naomi will put the link in the chat to the Zoom sign up for all the other ones as you go. And so I would imagine if you just wait patiently 1 second, she will do that. Or she'll force me to do it. Either way, we'll get it in there so you have the dates so you know as we go forward and what chapters we'll be looking at on those dates as we go through forward. But just know every 2 weeks we'll get together and we'll do this. So this one, the kickoff is introduction of the book, chapters 1 and 2, refining a vision and knowing ourselves as leaders. If you read the book, I'm going to thank you, Naomi. If you read the chapters or just by hearing those titles, I'm one of those who says to people, what do you want to talk about first? Doesn't matter to me. Which chapter would you guys like to discuss? The vision chapter or knowing ourselves as leaders? Or how about anybody who read the book? Just kind of observations right off the top. Take anything. You all know my strategy. I want to try not to talk as much. That's my strategy.
Okay, I'm gonna hop in here. Mike knows this, but I received an SOS text from some of my dear friends this morning. So instead of reading the entire chapters, which is what my plan was, I am here on site at a school, which doesn't get to happen as often as I like these days. But one of the things that I loved in the introduction is how she talks about how this is an art. And it takes years for artists to refine their practice, and the same is true for coaching. And so for me, I appreciate the grace and the space that this isn't going to be perfect, and it's messy and it's dirty. And I think you could be in this field as a coach for 40 years and still be refining your practice.
I agree 100%. I was looking to see the notes I put in the intro too. I kind of felt that same thing as we go through. I do like this. I think that anything else is any of these leadership or coaching books that we start to dig into, I'm always happy when I see something that I'm doing. And then I'm happier when I see something I'm not doing. And I'm like, oh, wait a second, this is great. I had a little extra bonus here of finding these paths through some of these other pieces. So yeah. Sarah, I'll tell everybody what I said to Sarah in a text this morning because she told me she was on her way to a school to do stuff. And I said, in what world do we live in where I'm the most prepared out of the three of us to participate in a thing, which is pretty awesome. So just a little, just a sense of that for myself, which is nice. All right.
I knew
Anybody
you
want to pick a
needed,
chapter? Oh, go ahead, Sarah. What'd you say?
I was gonna say, I know you needed a little bit of a boost this morning. That's why I'm just trying to help you out.
I appreciate that. Well, it did. It did a wonderful job because I didn't have to rush around today. I did this on Friday instead. I was like, oh, I'm going to sit Friday. I think when we do these book studies like this, I feel less guilty about scheduling this time into my schedule. Like I scheduled in an hour into my schedule on Friday to just sit and read the book and put myself notes in here, which was nice.
All
right.
I agree with what she said about it being an art and experience, but I also think that it also creates part of the problem because a lot of times teachers are moved into these positions and roles and not adequately fulfilled, and that just perpetuates the problem. and adds more to it, and more despair, instead of bringing in somebody who's already gone through this process and putting them into position to move the school. A lot of times it's a position created to keep a teacher or to promote a teacher, and they're not really qualified or don't yet have the skills, and it just perpetuates the problem.
And I
And
think it's a really good point. I think that idea of sometimes an educator might find themselves in this position of coach as you're right, as kind of a, a prize for doing a good job, but it might not be a prize that's wanted. Um, and you're
I,
right, they might not be prepared for that. I think that there are times when I work with teachers in a classroom, and we talk about the things they're doing in their classroom that are innovative and forward thinking and that others should know about. But then you ask them to share that with others, and there's instantly I can't. I can do it, but I can't teach it. And I think you're right to get to your point, Diane. I think that's absolutely right. Good point.
it is, and I said she talks about having gone through that, and I think there's an advantage to having an inside person, and that there's possibly trust already there. But sometimes that person promoted isn't even one being necessarily rewarded as a position being kept, and I've seen it fail or add more to the problem than help in most cases. That by the time they get to a point where she is now, she's like in the school to 20 years, you get to that point, how much money and time and people have already been more frustrated and added to it. So I said, I think it's a wonderful thing. And I think she's gotten, from what I'm getting from the book, a great place. And I like the fact that she's coaching other teams to help coach.
Hmm.
But when school districts do this, they need to make sure they've got somebody who's already through this initial phase. Even if they have to hire outside, or you just make your problem worse and your teachers more despondent, and more.
Yeah. Diane, I think there is some value in that idea. And I latched onto your thought there towards the end about this idea of maybe a school looking to provide some consultant support for these individuals to get them to a point. I mean, as many of us who are consultants, that's the beauty of it, is you come in, you build people up and work with people to a point, and then you're gone. And then that's it. I've gotten you to that point. I've worked with you to get to a point, not saying that you know everything, can do everything, and not saying that the consultant can know or do everything, but saying that together we got you to a level of comfort with moving the group forward. And I think that's really a key piece there. I think you're right. And I do like that she talks about teams as well, Diane. I wrote that, I kept highlighting that as she mentions it in the book, this idea of coaching teams, thinking about bigger purpose, bigger groups than just single individuals.
Well, the difference between a team and a group. And I think that's often misunderstood too. We put a bunch of teachers together to make a team, but they weren't a team, they were a group. And that's, again, what perpetuated the problem, because there wasn't that understanding of this is a group versus a team, what the roles are, what the role of the team is. The whole
What a great
definition
example
about.
of language, of words, right? A group is not a team. A team is, that's really interesting. Great point. Go ahead, Gail. You were so official in raising your hand so politely.
Well, I didn't want to interrupt because I was really interested in what you were saying. I did want to back up a little bit, and I, as I said, my book is somewhere in the snow out the driveway here. But I want to. For me, there's a difference between official coaching, like the systems that you've been talking about, Diane and Mike, where somebody's been assigned to be a coach
Hmm.
for whatever group or set of individuals it is, and just living a coaching lifestyle as a consultant. And I in my current practice, I'm rarely assigned to work with specific individuals. I'm not, I'm doing more professional development than anything. But when I do work with individuals, I want to use a coaching approach even though nobody told me I have to be, that that's my job title. And that's one of the things that I have loved so much about coaching, and Carolyn, the coaching monster, or the advice monster, has really uh, been something I'm trying to get rid of, not telling people what to do, but using that coaching approach to get them to discover their own solutions. So I just wanted to make that distinction as we get into the book. And I'm sorry, I don't know if the book approaches it that way.
Well, it's interesting, Gail. Yes, I agree with what you said, Gail, about that idea of that difference there. And it does in a sense, because the second chapter is starting to ask yourselves, it's asking you to know yourself. So it's having you be reflective on the way I take it, this kind of idea. Do you have a coaching philosophy? Is that how you're approaching everything you're doing? And I
Yeah.
think it does. I have to admit, I haven't read further beyond that. I don't know if anybody has. And if you have, good for you. You get an A+ for the day. I have not. I read what I have to do, and then I wait, and I'm going to read the next. But I think that is a really good point. Carolyn, hello. Welcome. So we'll walk us through a little bit, and then Gail, I'm sure this will come together even without the book. The book, knowing it's in the snow somewhere. Carolyn, Gail's in a blizzard. The book is in the snow somewhere. Maybe not the snow, but in a truck in the snow somewhere.
I've gathered that. Yeah, when she said the book was outside somewhere, I was like, "Oh, snow." Meanwhile,
Could be in the snow. We don't know. It's
70
just,
here today, so
it's
I
just
am.
outside
It
somewhere.
is not snow here.
Oh, let's see. I'm trying to look at what some of my questions I wrote down were. Or so the idea of chapter 1 talked about refining your vision. That was her approach to chapter 1, is looking at what makes a great team. And so she talks about the dimensions of a great team. And it's broken into 3 chunks: product, process, and learning. That's how she approaches that in this. And if you have your book in front of you, I am in chapter 1. I am on page 3, exhibit 1-1. Sorry, if I was more together, I would have actually scanned this page and put it into my computer so I could share it with you. The way she describes those 3 dimensions of a great team: product, a great team gets something done that is valuable, useful, and appreciated. Process, a great team's collaboration skills increase as a result of working together. And 3, learning, members of a great team learn. So that is her thought. Go ahead, Karen.
When I was reading this, sorry, I'm just gonna jump in. I wrote in my margins just kind of what each of those sections really mean. So product, I wrote, why are we meeting? Like what's the purpose? Why? Process, how are we showing or making progress? And then the learning is, what are we getting out of it? Those were my tidbits.
I think those are good, because she also mentioned some indicators under each. Product, process, and learning. And so under product, was our product well received? Was it well received? Did our clients think that our product was high quality? Did what we do make a difference to our clients? Do I feel proud of the work we did together? That was what she talks about in product. And I think you'll all know from our conversations, if we talk about any of the other things, anything that gives me a chart with reflective questions, I am in instantly. There's a big giant Post-it note next to it. I did a bunch of writing in it. I like these because it's always that thought of, do we do this enough? Do we, the bigger we, not just the coach, but we, all of us. And I think that goes to this idea that Gail was touching on, and Diane mentioned, this idea of bringing the group together and recognizing that it's not me and all of you, it's us together. So we all answer this question. We all reflect on how this went.
I think for me, when I look at these questions and I think about kind of all of the different hats that I pull from when I think about coaching, it comes to the idea that she really believes in partnership.
Mhm.
So it's not necessarily like I am here as the coach or the leader of the team to lead this group. It's really that question of how can I best serve this team? And Gail mentioned avoid the advice monster. We say that a lot. But this idea of how can I be a thought partner and sit back and ask better questions, and this idea of also helping people. We talk a lot about in AT, like de-siloing the work and helping people recognize the expertise that they bring. For me, I think we've all sat on teams where you get there and you're kind of asking that question of like, okay, so why was I invited to this meeting? And like, what is my role here? So for me, that was one of the thoughts that as we talk about this is really thinking about like, why are we asking the people that are here to be here? And then two, like, do they know the expertise that they're bringing with? And are we creating those environments where all of those voices are equally heard and valued at the table? And to me, that is the job. I don't know how many people on this call actually have coach in their official title. But I think that is one of the things that Mike and Carolyn and I have talked a lot about is developing this coaching way of being, so that all of our interactions are more coach-like.
I think you're right. And that's why I really like the idea that the first chapter is talking about refining a vision. It's really important. It's the who are we, why are we here, what do we hope to accomplish? Those things that are foundational to all of the work that's going to happen as we go forward. If we don't know that, how can we go forward and make progress? We can learn to interact better and we can do all those great things, but for what reason? What is our goal of that? Because ultimately we need that goal if we're thinking about coming into a team to provide some support. I want to know where that team hopes to be so that if they don't recognize it, I can recognize when it's time to just be done. Hey, good news. You're there. I'm going to slide out and you're going to take this forward. I think those pieces become really critical with that as they go through. I love it. Other thoughts on this on that piece of that chapter? Anybody else? I'm trying to use my strategies from my other book that lives on the side of my desk, which is this one, the Coaching Habit book with all of its post-its in it. And my favorite question out of that book is, and what else? The awe question. And what else? Well, it can be incredibly annoying to talk to me at times, but I will just keep saying it. Okay, and what else do you think?
So I highlighted under product that the opinions of the recipients of this product count. And I think that was it resonated with me because I feel like often we get together as a team and we say, yeah, we're going to do this. It's going to be so great. But then you really have to sit back and make sure that the end users also think it's great.
Yeah.
Because we're coming with some really great ideas or things that we can make this more systemic. But ultimately, if it's not meaningful to the people who we're creating this product for, then it's just a waste of our time and theirs.
And being very open with that too. And that goes back to that question asking. Is that, how is this going for everyone? Is this working and doing what you hoped it would? Is this propelling us forward towards our vision, towards the thing we were thinking about? We're 2 chapters in and I really like this book a lot already, by the way. I really like it. I'm now mad that it's been sitting on my shelf for as long as it has because it's really good. So there you go. So we had that. So that was the dimensions of a team: product, process, learning. Going to Diane's comment before, and I knew it was coming up in my notes, and now I found it. When do we really need a team? And it does go into that conversation of the difference between a group and a team. And that could be a really deep conversation that we could have with our members of, I'm not even going to call them a group or a team yet. I'm just going to call them the collective that are interested in this topic, whatever it is. Is, do we need a team or will a working group solve the problem? Will it move us forward? And I thought that was really interesting. Her first comment under that part of the chapter. In some organizations, there's a glorification of teams. And so there's this thought of everything must be a team, and maybe it's not necessary.
I think then probably there's a problem with that definition and people understanding that difference, both the administration in a school, but also the members of a team. Do you know whether you're a team or a group? Do you know the difference? And I think that's kind of first thing. And then, what is the outcome? What is the goal? And do the goals of the team or the group match what the administration actually wants to happen?
Yes.
If you're talking about in a school, or even with the AT and going into a school and going back to why am I here? Well, is it because you're clueless, or is it because you need direction, or is it because you want me to do the work?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, exactly those things. And it goes back to how many times do our conversations cycle back around to language and what words really mean? Like, I hear what you're saying, but what are you saying? So is that word the same? And how many times do we have conversations with people where they talk about accessible things, accessible materials, accessible tech, and they're really talking about tech that's available for people, not accessible. So it's that word gets a little gray, and so we need to dig into it a little bit. And I think this is the same kind of thing. I think there is an assumption. I don't think it is. People want to sound like they are collaborative, so they're going to throw the word team around a lot. How was that, Gail? You like that?
I don't think it's even sorry. I don't think it's even always wanting to assume to sound collaborative, but I think it's just a different understanding sometimes of what terminology is. I've moved all around, and using the same words mean different things in different environments, depending on what people are exposed to. And so you're thinking you're doing great and all this, and they're realizing they're on a different page than you because they're not using the same words in the same context as you are, or understanding them.
Yeah, good point.
So I, for several years now, have done a workshop that is called Consultation, Collaboration, and Coaching. And I talk about using the same words. I mean, we use those three words interchangeably. And what I try to do in the workshop is say, just for today, let's talk about them as different. So consultation is going in as an expert and having answers and being the advice monster, stuff like that. Then collaboration is I'm going to be working together with you to solve a problem. And then for me, coaching is you're going to identify the problems, you're going to identify the things that you want to address, and I'll use my knowledge and expertise to help with that. So that's the whole workshop in less than 5 minutes.
It's a bonus workshop within our conversation today. Excellent.
Well, it's been a valuable, I make up those paradigms because I need them. But that one's been a valuable tool for me. And what we did was we went back and we looked at the research about consultation and when it is useful and when it has the best effects, and about collaboration and when it's useful and has the best effects, and then about when to use coaching. So that's kind of fun, but basically, you can only be a consultant if there's an answer to the question. And when you're collaborating, you're figuring out what that answer is together, and then when you're coaching, you're encouraging somebody else to figure out what the answers are, and you don't have to know them.
That's true with coaching. You don't even necessarily have to be fully knowledgeable about the topic because you're drawing that out. Where where you're a consultant, you know, to be an expert on that. But a coach, some of the best advice and help I've gotten weren't from people even understood AT as much as they're able to understand how to get you to think things through and find answers and figure and define things.
Right. And Diane, it's that skill of asking the right questions, the right probing questions. It continues to come back to that over and over again. And that's why if we talk about piles of books someday, I'll show you all my question asking books, because that seems to be where I'm spending time, because that's what helps propel this forward. I think that's really interesting. And I think this makes sense in that this conversation we're having makes sense in the context of this developing a vision chapter, or this idea of doing that first. And even the part that Gail brought in is really important.
It's huge.
It's huge, because that's going to set the understanding between the group and perhaps the administration, who expects a certain thing to happen, but hasn't expressly said what I think is going to happen.
Or appropriately defined, because of the
Thank you.
misunderstanding.
That's a better way
group.
to say it. Yes.
Things are not
Appropriately
appropriate.
defined.
Yeah, within the administration, within your role in your group, because I think a lot of times the wrong thing is asked for, not understanding those terms, not understanding, you said using them interchangeably when they're not, but also you have then too is a cultural context of within not just the big environment culture, but within different schools and things too, of certain models are going to work a little better within a school's culture, depending upon where they're coming from and what they've been through already and how they're handling things. Getting everybody on that same page is key to start with.
And getting on that same page to start with takes time. And sometimes there's this element of get to the coaching right away. Let's get to it. And like we've already talked about, that takes time. Developing those interactions and that respect and that trust takes time. And is that administration prepared for that kind of time frame? And I think over as you do this more, I'm wondering if all of us have these same experiences as we do this. And I know some of us are coming from a different perspective than others. So I think some of us are in a district or a school or an organization providing this support. I think others, I'm going to point to myself, come into an organization or a school and do this. I know when I come into a situation, I ask a lot of these questions up front to the person who's trying to bring me in. Like, what do you want out of this? Right, Gail, you must have the same experience if you laughed out loud like that, right? It's what do you expect to happen?
I had an hour-long conversation like that this week. I've been asked to work with a team in some state, and oh my gosh, what she wanted to have happen was for everybody to agree with her. So we're going to work on that.
We've changed what we're working on.
That's not likely, but yeah.
But it is interesting. And if you don't do that ahead of time, then it swings around and bites you as you're moving through it, because people are like, well, why aren't you doing this, whatever their imagination of this is? And if you don't identify that first, I know over and over again, I spend a lot of time saying to groups, what I hear you saying is, right? Carolyn loves that. What I hear you saying is that what you are saying to me? What I hear you saying is you want to do this. Go ahead, Carolyn.
I do love when you say that, but I also looked right at Sarah's picture on the screen, because I know that from our conversations and our work together that she does that, and it's beautiful when she does it. But I always like that phrase. I'm like, oh, I heard it again. Yeah,
but it's such a great way to get and probe into some of these conversations, to get to this vision part. Because like Gail says, if that individual has one vision of what they think is going to happen, and you have a completely different vision, you're not going to be successful.
Yeah, it helps to clarify again of what is my role here. And when you say this, I'm hearing this, do you mean something different. So
Right.
no, I think it's a really helpful phrase. But yeah, I looked right at you and Sarah. Yeah, guilty.
Sarah will
Mike rubs
respond.
off. Yeah. I think a lot of what we're talking about too, though, is slowing down. And sometimes in education, we feel this like need to come in and solve something. This is really high stakes. We're talking about students. And so it takes that reminder to ourselves to slow down and to wade through some of the messiness and the grayness. And when we do that, it ultimately benefits our educators and our students. It's almost like we need to give ourselves that permission too, to say it's okay to have what sometimes can be a little bit of an uncomfortable conversation, especially if you have a team like Gail mentioned, where, ultimately, I just want everyone to agree with me, right? Like I want that. That takes a long time to kind of unearth it. But what we found is when we don't, we can go a year or two all thinking that we're thinking the same things and we're on the same path. And then we know that if we had just stayed in the conversation a little bit longer and asked some of those questions, and sometimes it's not one conversation, it's multiple conversations. It's really helpful. And the other thing, I think, to Diane's point, is sometimes we're having these conversations, we don't have all of the right people at the table. And so then everyone at this table, a lot of times our administration isn't at the table for some of these early conversations. And so we're all on one page, but that administrator isn't. So it's really that other idea of thinking like, who else might need to know this information, or how are we ensuring that they're a part of this team?
Or even updated on what our
Mhm.
thought process is. You're right. I think that administration being part of it at the beginning is critical, whether they're in the conversation directly, or is the conversation kind of looped through them after a first group makes a pass at it.
Mhm.
I think
Yeah.
that becomes really important. I've had some administrators come to me after a second or third visit with a team and say, "This is not what I thought at all." And my comment back to them was, "That's why we asked you to be part of our conversation. This is critical. This is the moment. If we all agree on a path, then we can map that out, and it makes it not easier, but at least it's mapped out and we get a sense of what we're going to do." But you're right, Sarah. All those times people are like, well, it's got to happen right away, got to happen right away. In order for it to happen right away, we all need to participate to the level necessary to get it kind of locked in the beginning as best we can. I recognize things change and our plan changes and grows and modifies itself as we move. I get all that, but getting as close as possible from the beginning becomes really important.
Could I interject?
Of course, Mary. Imagine if I said no, Mary, and I turned your mic off. Just imagine what that would be like.
That's
No.
okay, I understand.
Of
But anyways,
course.
I'm just a lowly occupational therapist, but
Oh, now I'm going to turn your mic off, Mary. Stop it.
I do have the assistive technology credential, but I was in a school district and the administration didn't tell me this, but when I interviewed, but when I got in there, they didn't want any assistive technology because they were so overwhelmed with the caseload. So, I mean, it's so often that I'm in related services that we are not included in the curriculum, the humanities curriculum or the mathematical curriculum or whatever, and we need to be.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that goes back to the description and kind of the delineations that Gail talked about, is that bringing that back to an administrator and say, what is your expectation of my role here? I would like to be more collaborative. I would like to work deeper with the teams. I have an expectation. Sometimes we need to put that out first. If someone's not willing to do that, we put that out and say, my expectation is to be collaborative with all the team members and to be part of this team. Is that what you think I should be? Challenge people to give you their opinion and see what they think. because sometimes like Gail said, they might just want you to be there to nod your head as they talk and just say, yes, whatever you just said, I agree with. That's perfect. And that requires a much different person. You know, I think that's really.
And I think sometimes too, to Gail's point and many others on this call, is even when we go to somebody knowing what it is that we want from them, there are a lot of times that I will call either Mike or Carolyn and I'll say, hey, I just need somebody to like think this through with me and ask questions and help me walk through it. And there are other times where I'm like, hey, I know that you've gone through this before and you have experiences that I don't. I'm not looking for a coaching conversation. I want you to come at this and just tell me, like, based on your experience. And I think that we can model that too for the teams that we work with and for each other, is recognizing when are those situations where, yes, I'm looking for a consultant versus when am I looking for a coach? And I will always defer back to, we had a really great opportunity to be coached by Sharon Thomas. And in my head, I will always hear her voice saying, even when people tell you, I just want you to tell me what to do, like, avoid that advice monster as much as you can, because what ends up happening is you tell them and then either they're like, yeah, I already tried that and it didn't work, so you're not very smart. Or they go and they try it and it didn't work because it wasn't their idea. And so even when I'm wearing that consultant hat, like I still have that in my head, is how can I lean on the expertise that they've had or the experiences that they've had, or throw out like, hey, I've seen this work. It might be a really bad idea, but this is an opportunity.
Yeah, I think so too. Like even, yeah, you're right. Even when the expectation is Mary's example of just come in, tell us what we need to move on. Can I kind of work in some of my coaching ideas and philosophy and instill in them this idea that I hear what you're asking for and I'll work with you to do that. To provide you this knowledge, but let's do it together.
You know, I think that the consultant role is actually most useful after we've decided on some assistive technology
Mhm.
and are trying to put it into place and stuff, because then there are answers that, you know, how does this thing turn on? What does it do? Where should I put it in the room? Things like that. For me, the coaching comes first. What is it you want to accomplish? What is it that you've already tried? You know, I've got my list of questions.
Yeah.
But Jim Knight, I think it is, suggests that you make a coaching recipe. He calls it a recipe. I'm not quite sure why, but just a list of coaching questions that you ask all the time, that you just have in your back pocket. And they're the ones you've talked about already. What else? And things
Yeah.
like that.
Right.
But for me, the expert consultation really comes after you've made decisions about what you're going to do.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think then don't we imagine in that scenario that the coaching aspect comes in and out of this whole situation, because I agree there is a part in the beginning that is asking you to be an information collector and a bridge builder and a collaborator to get information from people.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is that moment where decisions are made, hopefully with more than just you. Hopefully it's everyone participating in that decision making. And then there is that next part, which starts to take on a bit of a coaching collaborative role again. Is okay, we've made a decision. What now?
But okay, but related services also need to be in these curriculum groups, because we need to address the general curriculum. Like as an occupational therapist, they want me to be a handwriting teacher.
Mhm.
That's an awful expensive handwriting teacher, right? So so if I could say, you know, use the 4-line marker, K through 3, everywhere, so that, the kids catch on. And, this just general curriculum ideas so that it will reduce the caseload.
Yeah. Yeah. Ultimately, as related service people, the thought would be to constantly be working with the administration to say, how can I best utilize my skill set to move us all forward? And is having me sit and do individual writing instruction, is that reaching a mass amount of students in our best way? Or could I provide some instruction to the rest of the team that gets us to a point, and then I step in if there's a need for a more specialized skill? It's
Right.
that idea
And
of teaching people what they already have on their computer.
It's hitting the pocketbook. I'm an OT too. I'm now doing AT, but it's hitting the pocketbook, is getting them to show that a lot of your curriculums nowadays have accessible pieces to them, but the curriculum directors don't even know to buy them, or that they're available, or the importance of it. So it sometimes, if you can find, if your curriculum has those pieces, and then show the special ed director to show the curriculum director that, hey, this is a lot cheaper to turn on this part, or that this has actually even been bought and we have it and need to turn it on, versus you paying me this much to do this, or you're paying for audiobooks, or you're paying Google Read and Write, you're paying all these things when this is something we've already paid for and we have accessible, but I need your help and cooperation to work with curriculum to turn, and it's getting your director to go that way. That's where you get the most success, is when you can hit it in their pocketbook. The same with IT, when you start turning on those things of taking it back to special ed and to your finance and curriculum of, this saves you money by turning on these features. If not only that, it helps not just SPED, a lot of times it helps your RTI and your English language learner kids. All those features, there's universal design, which is the big thing, but all those features help save you money, not just in SPED, but across these areas. And that's when you start getting a response. And if you can get finance in there to help and tell IT that the lawsuit comes out of their budget when they're not met, it goes real fast.
Yeah. Yeah. And isn't that moving us, just doing that Diane just described, that is moving us into a different, it's moving us towards a different role. And that is leadership right there. That is what that is. We're moving ourselves towards that. This is my smooth way to transition us to chapter 2. See what I just did there. Which is knowing ourselves as leaders. But how do we do those kinds of things? What are the skills we have that we can bring to that scenario? What are the individuals that will just stick with administration, because that seems to be where our minds are right now. What kinds of leaders are the administration looking towards? What will they respond to? What kind of characteristics can I demonstrate to them?
And it
That
may not
show
be
I am collaborative. Go ahead, Diane.
right. You may not be the best one, but if you can get a teacher on board that will then take it, things move even faster and smoother. If you can get a teacher to take that through, sit down, if you have a teacher you work with, but admins ultimately wants to know it's going to save them money.
Yeah,
And that
I agree. I think
of
that is a driver. That is certainly a driver.
and second, SPED wants to know it's going to avoid a lawsuit. The
Which
rest of
is
that,
kind of C1A up there at the top. It's saving money. It's right. It's the same thing. But the trick sometimes for us is to how to get individuals to move from, I want to save money, to I want to empower you, the you that's in the group right now. I want to empower you to be more of a leader in our school. How does that, we need them to make that connection. Because, somebody could be just simply short-sighted and say, well, I'll save money and I'll just not hire Mike. I'm solved. I just saved money. Congrats to me.
Yeah, and
but you
that's
haven't
happening
moved
all over the
anything
place.
forward. And so again, I think it's about, you're right. I think it's tie it to something that matters to them. And we
And
can
say,
spend the rest of our hour complaining about how sad it is that the money matters, but okay, the saving money matters, but how do I rephrase that or reimagine that to a way to save money is to be more collaborative and team-based in the supports you do. Like
and
that's the connection we need to make.
yeah, it's not just the money, but
Yeah.
how it's going to help across the board. The more people you have bought in and buy in on
Right.
it. And then they start seeing, because again, even if it's saving their money, they're not going to pay a whole lot of attention to you until you can show them the others are going to buy in and the CrossFit. So it's really getting a teacher on your side and framing it around and a plan that, you know, if we do this, I can, and it might mean extra on your side, but then it's, I can do this and they can do this. And it's going to mean that we have, you know, the aides are going to be less stretched because we can now put these supports in place. They can do this independently, da, 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 da. You've got to have the whole thing kind of mapped out and teachers backing you up that said they'll be willing to be the test case.
So Diane, because we're talking about coaching today, I'm curious about when a coaching approach might come into the process that you're talking about. We're a lot of what you're saying is, you know, sharing factual knowledge, giving them good reasons to want to do the right thing. But I'm wondering, at what point do we start to use a coaching approach, even with the administrators or the teachers that you're talking about bringing in?
I think
Um,
the coaching comes in when you're working with them and helping initially to even get before you go to admin is working with the teachers in the classroom and helping to show them how this is going to help not help their students in the classroom by doing these few things, and getting them to understand what it is you're doing and empowering the teachers to then help their students, that they don't need, it's working as an OT, it's working yourself out of a job. Not that you'll ever really be it, but it's working you out that case because you're empowering the teacher to be able to put a lot of those things that you do in place in the classroom. And then it backs up to getting more. Once you get through admin and can put things in place, then it becomes a gentle coaching to the teachers to how to coach the other teachers to do this
So-
and empowering. It's a slow process.
so I want to say that I actually believe you could use a lot of coaching strategies with
Yes.
the administrators. Some of those questions that Mike's been talking about. And I've been sitting here thinking about, okay, what kind of questions would I ask an administrator in order to get them involved in the whatever the project is that you're
Right.
you're promoting. Um, s- so and Mike, I think you've actually suggested several, like, what is your goal in this project? What is your goal for me? What do you want me to accomplish as an OTAT specialist?
Where do you see me?
Things like
How am I going to help us get there? Yeah.
yeah.
Unfortunately, though, I think a lot of times the mayor's talking about it goes the other way around. You're brought in and you're having to go to them to get started on this would help save versus them bringing you in as, because things get so busy and so crazy with sped. You're actually most of the time, I think, having to go the opposite direction of trying to convince the admin to even start listening to you, never mind finding out what your role is. So how that would, to me, it would be more of how do we coach the admin with the right questions to see the value in what I'm bringing to you.
That exactly.
Yes. And I think that we can't underestimate the power each of us would bring to that situation because they reached out to you. They brought you
Paying your
into their
salary.
situation. So there is something, and that might be one of the questions. And that gets to that kind of core of how do you see me helping this forward? How do you see me moving this to a successful conclusion? You must, because you asked me to be part of this. So what does that look like? And then we get a sense of, and I think sometimes just by acknowledging that out loud, you've changed a bit of the dynamic of that situation, you've made it a bit more collaborative right from that moment. Is that, look, I see what's happening here and I want to be part of this, but we need to work together to figure out what this even is, and then what are the steps to go forward. That's
Yeah.
I think it's really it is interesting. I think sometimes it is a and this is just something I've recognized over time as I do these things more and more with teams and schools and organizations, is taking a step back from it a bit, a little reflective step back, and kind of a stare out at the group as they're talking, and really focus on not talking a lot and just listening to what they're saying, because they're telling you a lot. And they're sometimes framing it in a sense of that, we want an expert to come in and solve the problem, but there's a real quick moment where you can turn that around and say, well, do you? Is that really what you want? Because I don't know. That doesn't sound like what you want. And find those moments that you can highlight or illustrate to them things that have happened in a conversation that identify their need to move this forward in a more productive way. If Mary says to them, I can work with 5 students in a week, Mary, I know I'm just making numbers up, Mary. I can work with 5 students in a week and I can move them forward. Or we can collaborate as a team and we can have 10 students moving forward in some way with me providing additional support. Wouldn't that be better? Just kind of.
Okay, but not, wouldn't that be better? But what's your preference?
Well,
If you're
yeah.
talking to administrator, because
'Cause they
there may
don't like
be,
it.
no, because there may be one of those students where there's something going on that we don't even know about. I mean,
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think of this a lot when because I think that a lot of consultations, when those requests come in, are there's a large amount of those that can be resolved with a little skill from
Yeah,
the team members who requested it. A little deeper understanding, a little skill building, a little knowledge about resources. I'm flipping back into my Noster model there, but this idea of what could I give them a little bit of that they would have moved forward. They would have perhaps still hit a barrier at some point, but would they have moved forward a little bit, had some success, and had a good experience with these kinds of supports with their students? And then I would get them and they'd be in a different mindset, a different moment where they'd be able to accept some different kind of coaching because they would have had an experience that was successful, but they didn't need to call me. So how do you
Yeah.
get somebody that little bit of something?
Before we go into chapter 2, at the very end,
Ooh, it's almost 1 o'clock.
it
Yeah, go ahead.
mentions about Michelle, and a teacher, and she mentions her students being collaborative. And that's why I had my big stick about building thinking classrooms.
Mhm.
And then also she in chapter 2, they mentioned, are you going to be in front of the class, or are you going to be in a circle of the class, or and building thinking classrooms mentions that. And he mentions defronting the classroom and making it so that you are not the leader of that class.
Mhm.
And I feel that philosophy. He did 14 years of research with that book. And that philosophy, it just rings so true with me that kids have to learn to collaborate. They have to learn to take risk, and they have to, what was the other thing? Because he boiled it down to 3 goals to make a successful student: learn to collaborate, learn to take risks, and learn to, I can't remember the third one. In collaboration, I also include advocating for oneself.
Yeah.
And what's the third one?
I think that all makes sense, Mary. I mean, I think if we had time, I would love to dig deeper into it. Maybe we'll circle this back around for the start of the next one.
Mike, did you read that book?
I have it. I have it. I
Oh,
haven't read it yet.
no.
It's in my pile. Assume, Mary, that most of these books live on my pile and I'm working through them
Right.
one book study at a time.
Okay.
But if when you get the book, there are these great reflection question
Oh, persevere
breakdowns
was the other one.
in the chapter, and it's reflection on leadership, reflection on power dynamics, reflection on emotional intelligence. Great questions to ask the people you're working with. These are awesome. Reflection on leadership, page 30, reflection on power dynamics, page 33, and then reflection on emotional intelligence, page 37. Those are all in chapter 2. The questions are amazing. They're really good. Both to ask yourself and to ask others if you're starting to work with teams and starting to think about where are they at on their team journey, their leadership journey, their working in a team and collaborative journey. Just really interesting. So I wanted to get that out because I had notes to remind myself to say that because they were really good. Everybody, it's the top of the hour. This went exactly
Oh,
how
my
I was
goodness.
expected. Very little plan, and it all worked itself out, and it was great. And it was a good conversation. Our next time we're going to get together in 2 weeks, March 18th, Monday, March 18th, same time, same place. Naomi, just put the link in the chat one more time. We're going to talk about chapters 3 and 4. Maybe we'll hit on chapter 2. We'll do a quick little recap of chapter 2 also. Chapter 3, creating a culture of trust. And just so you know what they're called, the chapters, that grabs you. Chapter 4, defining purpose, process, and product. Those will be our next 2. See each other on the 18th. I will post this up here so I'll post it up on our YouTube channel so people can see the recording, and hopefully we'll get even more people to join us. Continue on your book journey. Have a great rest of the week. It was good seeing all of you again. I haven't seen everybody in a while, so it's very nice to see you all. Have a good rest of the day, and I'll talk to you soon. See ya.